Hi, everyone. Before we get going, I have to do my tradition of burning some incense. I have a story for you today. This is a story that is a Christian story, but it is not talked about. And I say that because I am Christian. I've never heard about this story. I've talked to other Christians, they have not heard of this story. So I'm very excited to bring this forward today. You could disagree with this story, you could agree with this story, and I don't really think that that's the point of what I'm going to talk about today. I think this is really just an experience. Experiences are the deepest form of me connecting to myself, to my world, to my relationships. So I am hopeful that what I talk about today will make you feel more connected to God. So let's get going. We are going to rewind all the way back to 30 AD. 30 AD is about when Jesus Christ was crucified. For those who are Jesus followers and Christians, we know that that is not the end of the story. His resurrection is the foundation of our belief. And whether you are someone that is a Jesus follower and you agree with this, or you are fully in disagreement, or maybe you're even navigating being in the middle, you are accepted here, and I fully understand all three walks of that journey. I've been there myself. What I want to talk about is the history. So after that moment in time, these people that were followers all scattered. And this was because they all experienced Jesus in these different personal ways, and they felt this need to go and spread that. So they moved to places like Judea, Greece, Rome, Syria. And what they're actually doing is they are trying to share an experience, a story, a testimony with the world through missionary work, through connection, through, again, storytelling, through conversations across the table. It was all at the time shared orally. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. So at that point, the Bible that we know today was not what they had. What they were utilizing was really their mouth and their heart, and they were sharing their experience. There wasn't any type of defined structure, there wasn't any type of defined religion. It was really just, I have the most incredible thing that happened and you need to know about it. And I want you to have a piece of this and I want you to experience this. I think that's so beautiful because that must be out of the genuine nature of love, to leave your home behind, to leave your family behind, to go and spread the message of the beauty of Jesus Christ. These stories about Jesus at the beginning of Christianity were really spread through memory, through repetition. It is interesting to think that that is the earliest Christian movement. It's not everyone gathering around a church. It's not everyone reading at Bible study together. It's none of that. So of course, over time, the stories were written down, but it took a long time. And I don't know if that's something that is common knowledge. But the stories were written over like the span of like 50 to 100 years after Jesus's crucifixion. And so those are the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But alongside with those scriptures are also letters that were written to different communities from the Apostle Paul, who at the time was fully opposed to Jesus. And so during Jesus's walk of life, Paul was around at that same time period, but was fully on the other side of rejecting Jesus, putting him down, spreading rhetoric and propaganda that Jesus was just not the thing to follow. And so on his journey to Damascus, he speaks about how he feels that he encountered Jesus Christ along his walk, and Jesus appeared to him as like this being of light, and that Paul lost his sight for 3 days. And I'm sure that you're familiar. He went by Saul at the time, but after he went through this transformation, he changed his name to Paul, and Paul was the apostle of Jesus. So then that's how you have all the other books in the New Testament. These are actually just letters from Paul to these different areas. So from the beginning, this is what I love. Christianity was not one voice. It was multiple voices, multiple experiences, multiple stories, multiple testimonies that were all shared through the collection of stories, interpretations, memories, stories that were passed down from generations. And this started to create that fabric of Christianity. But then something shifted. As time went on, Christianity began to move from the outer skirts of society into the center of society. This is where we see that Christianity has more of a structure. It becomes more defined. It becomes more organized. And in many ways, it did bring that stability. It did bring that foundation. But to some people who were experiencing Christianity prior, as they saw that the structure of Christianity began to increase, so did the distance. The distance from simplicity, the distance from silence, the distance from meditation. So instead of resisting loudly to what was going on in the middle of the political world, they actually just left. This was not something that they all did at one time. This was an actual movement. This was an activation. So there were many different individuals, from men to women to children, that all left, and they began walking away from their cities, and they all ended up in the Egyptian desert. So one of the earliest known figures of that group of Christians is called Anthony the Great. He decided to do as Jesus said, to leave everything behind and to worship him. He surrendered to the simplicity of this teaching, and others followed that. But the beauty of all of this is that nobody told them to do this. There was no hierarchy making them do this. They had this undeniable feeling inside of them that made all of them leave their life behind and follow Jesus in a very physical and simplistic way. From them to the Apostle Paul, you can see a pattern in Jesus revealing himself, and then that power moving through these humans to then go and transform themselves. The desert was a place to strip away everything from society. It was quiet. There was no distraction. There was no performance. It was just you and nature, and then everything else that remained, which was within you before you left. So now you're in this quiet, serene space, but you still have all of the noise of your body internally from everything you just left behind. Their thoughts, their fears, their concerns, their worries, their family, their belongings. So the desert life didn't make that easier. The desert life didn't take that away from them, but it made them honest. And in that honesty, they began to practice a different type of life, a different form of living. So they prayed often in short phrases. They memorized scripture, and they especially focused on the book of Psalms. They sat in silence. They weren't trying to escape their life. They knew they were committed to becoming these desert monks that emulated the teachings of Jesus Christ, and that was it. One of the sayings that comes from one of these desert fathers is, "Go sit in your cell, and the cell will teach you everything." And what that means is, when you stop running, then you start seeing. When you stop avoiding, you start feeling. When you stop denying, you start understanding. And maybe that is what connects all of this message together. From Jesus to the early believers, to the apostles, to the missionaries, to the written gospels, to the letters, to the monks in the Egyptian desert, to right now, you and me. There has always been a thread of humans trying to put together life and finding a way to go deeper into our own hearts and our own souls to find God. And again, this might be triggering to some Christians, but that is not through a structure. That is through an experience. So maybe not all of us are able to or need to walk through a desert to find that. I recognize that that's not necessarily as feasible in today's world, though it would be incredible. But there are ways that we can continue to pull these beautiful teachings from last week's concept of this interior castle, from a Spanish female saint 500 years ago, to this story of Egyptian Christian monks, to Jesus's teachings alone, to know that God is. So before we end, I would love to invite you into one of those moments again where we can just experience a little bit of heaven right now in this moment and go through a little meditation. So let's take a deep breath in and slow down. And we're just going to sit here for a minute. There's a moment in the scriptures where Jesus says, "Go into your inner room and pray in secret." And maybe what that means is that there's a place within our hearts right now where we can go, where we are honest with ourselves, where we know the truth, where we know that God is. Maybe it's quiet. Maybe you should look around and try and paint a picture of this place so that you can often come back here when you need to connect with God. Maybe it's a home. Maybe it is the desert. Maybe it's the beach. Maybe it's on top of a mountain. And maybe it's the castle like we talked about last week. In this place, you do not need to perform. You do not need to prove yourself. You do not need to be anyone other than who you are. So right now, let's just keep our intention here in this place that is quiet and serene, where we can talk to God. Notice your breath. Notice your body. Notice your thoughts. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to fix anything. You just need to be aware. And as you sit here, you might remember or hear, be still and know. There is something deeper than the noise of this world. There is something deeper than the suffering that you're going through at this time. There is something deeper than the wins and losses of your week. So as we come back to the real world, we can open our eyes. We can remember that that place within you does exist. It's always available, so visit it frequently. And as the monk said, go into your inner cell, and the cell will teach you everything. The teaching is so relevant and is so applicable right now to whatever it is that you're going through. And that is the beauty of these ancient teachings. They all apply right now because human suffering collectively continues to happen. And also the goodness of God continues to be seen. God is and will always be within reach. And I would challenge you to continue to go into your inner space over the next week. And even if it's a 2 to 5 minute meditation, just sit there and feel it. I guarantee you will have a calmer week ahead. I guarantee you will feel a difference from this week in comparison to the one that you had last week, because making space for God every day, every morning, making space to experience the goodness of God is all that you need to stay positive, to stay grounded, and to feel uplifted. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you again next week. Bye. Mwah.